r/AskReddit by Reddit tells, what happened at a wedding that made it obvious that the bride and groom shouldn't be getting married? Are they still together? My sister-in-law got married last fall, and after the ceremony they got in an epic fight over the marriage certificate and didn't come to the reception until 2 hours after it started. A week later, they separated for a few weeks while trashing each other on Facebook. They're still together, and she's now pregnant. Edit. I also photographed this wedding, and it was the most stressful professional experience I've ever had. I forgot to mention too that the groom and groomsmen dropped a bunch of acid before the ceremony and continued into the reception. He freaked out, had a panic attack, and left. Dropping acid before your own wedding is a bold move. My good friend was marrying this guy. We will call him Ned. Ned definitely had a drinking problem that everyone swept under the rug. He promised my friend he would keep it under wraps for the wedding. He made it down the aisle, but by the reception he was binge drinking. By then end of the night the groom Ned completely disappeared. No one could find him. A few nervous laughs turned into mild panic when the lights were turned on in an effort to find him. My husband decided to go look for him in the parking lot, where he finds Ned on his lips in the dirt. He had smoked a joint and got the spins. My husband tried to talk sense into him, reminding him this is your wedding, dude. He got Ned to come inside and did the most cringy walk of shame past the bride's family, who was very cross with him. Ned was supposed to drive them 11 miles from the venue to their hotel in bride's grandfather's vintage Corvette. He was too drunk to drive, so the bride's grandfather drove them, and the bride had to sit on the middle armrest with no seatbelts. Grandpa drops them at the hotel. Bride barely gets groom up to the room, where he passes out on the bed. Bride had to wander the halls looking for someone to help her out of her wedding dress, since her groom was passed out drunk. The word annulment was definitely floating around that next morning. As crushed as the bride was, she stuck it out. 3 years later they are now separated and divorcing because he is still a drunk. Oh man, that brings back memories. My friend's wedding had a hotel nearby, so most of us stayed there rather than drive home. Get a call after the party while settling into the room. Hey, it's me, bride. Can you come up here? Hurry. I immediately go into panic mode, grab some cash and keys thinking I needed to make a getaway with the bride. I get there and she's like, can you help get my dress off the buttons? Are too small for hubby, and she hands me this hook thing. WTF, who thought this was a good idea? 10 minutes of frantically unbuttoning while groom is pouring champagne, lighting candles, wedding dress designers, zips, velcro, literally anything besides tiny buttons that require a neurosurgeon, steady hands and an extremely sober person. Shortly after the ceremony the groom announced to everyone, including his bride, my niece, that he had enlisted in the Navy and was due to report in a few weeks. She was beyond surprised. They didn't even make it a year. Made a life-altering decision without involving or even informing the spouse. Such a surprise it didn't work out. One of my friend's kids did this. Didn't inform his bride until the reception that he was joining the army and that they'd be moving away. She was still in college. When she pointed that out, he told her that you won't need that degree anyway because we're going to be making good army money and have a family. We get more money when we are married and have kids. She had plans to attend law school. When she balked, his mother started berating her right in front of everyone about how she needed to be a good wife and support her husband while he goes to be a hero and defend this country. She went home with her parents. He joined the army as a single guy and washed out of boot camp. His mom blames her for that too. Says that he was too broken after the unpatriotic liberal B***TCH left him. She can rant for an hour about how terrible the girl was and how she should have supported her son the way she supported her husband. Plot twist. My friend has been slowly separating his financial ties to his wife for about 2 years. She drives him so nuts that he's getting ready to leave her too. During the cake cutting he smashed cake in her face. She immediately started crying and went to the bathroom for about 30 minutes. Then they got into a huge fight and barely spoke the rest of the night. Shockingly they are still married, but they still fight all the time. She's my friend from college, so we keep in touch occasionally. She never has good things to say about him. My mama has always said it's pretty telling how a couple behaves during the cut of the cake. I've always paid attention to that, and she is right. The level of respect they have for each other shows up better at this moment than any other. Where the hell did this cake in face smashing crap come from? I've come across this in Reddit before and guess it must be an American thing. Here in Australia I've never heard of it and wouldn't have dreamt of doing it to my beautiful wife on our special day. Husband disappeared 2 hours into a 6-hour reception because he was bored. Just went into the house and hung out on his phone. It was a chill ranch thing with games and drinking and dancing. Adults only. Also I didn't meet him until the wedding while me and the bride, hung out pretty frequently. So there was some lead up to that didn't help. He wasn't cheating, just watching golf videos. Edit also they lasted less than 2 months. Second edit for clarity. They didn't divorce because of that. Dude 180D, as soon as the ring was on. Going golfing every night for hours with different groups of people. She asked him to limit it to a couple times a week. She suggested therapy. He blew her off. She got out and is much happier. The wedding was semi-destination, 6 hours away. His friends drove out there and he ditched them too. The reception was more bonfire way with free booze and yard games. Stuff both of them had done before with his friends. He bounced right after the obligatory wedding stuff when we finally got to do fun things. I could try and psychoanalyze what he was thinking, but who knows? Probably some kind of regret. The groom had his car stolen on the morning of the wedding and spent the whole day swearing and punching inanimate objects because, as we all heard 1,000 times that day, not only was it the most important thing in his life, it also wasn't insured. The wedding was at a Boy Scout hall for no apparent reason, and the reception was in the cafeteria at one of those underwater world places with the glass tunnel. But no one was allowed to go see the fish because, get this, the whole day had a Lion King theme. Then towards the end of the night the bride beat one of the bridesmaids half to death because she caught her fucking a groomsman who she tearfully admonished for cheating on her. I have no idea how long the marriage lasted for. I never saw or heard from them again. Not so much evidence that they shouldn't have been together, but evidence that Maisel is just a horrible thoughtless person. The wedding was supposed to start at 3 p.m. At 3, she was getting in a bathtub in her hotel room to unwind before starting to get ready. All of us bridesmaids were already ready. I had to call my mom and tell her that we were at least an hour out. My brother was there waiting already. Oh, and it was October, Halloween, around 40th and windy, and it was an outdoor wedding in a park with no indoor venue attached. Their poor guests ended up waiting more than an hour and a half. The divorce papers have been filed and should be final within a few months. Just how? Just the idea of being in the bath when my wedding is supposed to be starting gives me anxiety. I can't imagine how anyone could unwind in that scenario. What about her hair and makeup? That alone would take at least an hour. Have a friend that is honestly one of the nicest, most caring people I know. She's awesome, but when it comes to time management she is just so scatterbrained and thoughtless, but in the sense that people are waiting thought that will ever occur to her. We'd planning dinners and tell her earlier times knowing she'd be late. At her wedding, she was 2 hours late to the rehearsal dinner. Groom just told us to eat. Everyone in the party just chalked it up to yup, that's Amy. She was hemming a dress, not the dress she was wearing that night or the wedding dress, some random dress. Started working on it and lost track of time. My wife was a bridesmaid and is a general time Nazi. She was giving me play by play of all the things that were distracting the bride that day. She kept her on track and the wedding only started like 10 minutes late. My wife still considers that one of her proudest accomplishments. A wedding guest looking out of the window beamed at the groom waiting at the altar and said she's here, and the groom jokingly pretended to run away. It went down like a lead balloon because he had actually run away the previous year, literally went out to the shops and didn't come back for 8 weeks while she was pregnant with their first child. The bride's mother gave him a look that would have wilted the wedding flowers, and happy chatter in the room turned to frosty silence just in time for the entrance of the bride. They are still together many years later and have had more children together, but I wouldn't describe them as happily married. Worked as a cook for a 4-year in advance booked wedding spot. I would prep 4 days, work 1 wedding, and have my days off. My weddings were Saturdays. I'd never see the ceremony, often off-site. If on-site, I was busy. So this one wedding, people complained about the sun reflecting off the water. They booked the time and place themselves refusal help, but blamed us for not having a sun shield of some sort. Had 100 more people there than planned. Party, and we ran out of food. 40 and 140 are 2 different beasts. Begins to turn to a coke party. 30 seconds after the food, like everyone went to their cars and the washrooms. I mean 100 people at once. Bride and groom, their parents, strung up. The poor DJ got his work in. Bride would come in and grabbed his wrists, telling him to change songs every 45 seconds. Play this now this. People started whispering a bunch, like everywhere there was something up. More coke, more whispers. A security guy comes up to me and tells me the new husband is passed out in his car. Dead drunk, car is running. New wife is now loose and fucks someone. It is unknown who, not husband, behind out garbage cans. The wedding was fake. Bride and groom were quite young and dated happily for several months. Bride was in a hurry to settle down, I think to fit in with our friendship group who had, or were doing the same, and pushed for engagement, and groom was reasonably happy to oblige, but not ready to take the next step, and wanted a long engagement. Bride began pushing to set wedding dates almost immediately. Groom's mother and father were unwell with both physical and mental health issues. Getting closer to the wedding date, groom made it known that he loved bride, but wasn't ready to settle down yet. Bride wasn't having any of it and complained to her own immediate family about this, who start harassing groom's parents about how he's a dog, mistreating their daughter, etc. Groom agrees to go ahead with the wedding if bride's family leave his parents alone. Wife wasn't happy with this and called the celebrant to talk some sense into him. Celebrant refused to perform a wedding where one party wasn't on board. Bride insisted the event go ahead and that they pretended was real, but with a bunch of guests who had been married or attended weddings recently. We all immediately noticed the celebrant didn't say the words legally required for marriage. Edit. In Australia, evidently this isn't a requirement elsewhere, and no paperwork was signed. Groom's parents refused to attend the reception, leaving table 1 half empty and not paying for the bar service. Guests took back their gifts. Bride and groom avoided each other the entire time except for a super awkward first dance. The whole thing was super surreal and awkward. They split up a couple of months later. Well, at her bachelorette party she broke down, drunk, and told us that she knew she shouldn't marry him and that she knew it wouldn't work. We begged her not to go through with it, but she did. On the day of the wedding, his uncle pulled him aside and said, "You don't have to do this." While counting out $100 bills, the wedding was delayed due to a storm. This caused the bride to get angry and snap at everyone who even tried to talk to her. Finally the storm let up and the wedding took place. Mid-reception the bride angrily stormed out of the reception, and that kind broke up the festivities. No, they are not still married. She started cheating on her husband less than a year in, and they divorced shortly thereafter. This was 15 to 16 years ago. He remarried a year or so later and is still married to that woman. She just finished up her second divorce. I haven't talked to her in years because, well, she's a really toxic person who does not see how her actions contribute directly to her misery, and I no longer live in our tiny hometown, so I don't have to be friends with shitty people I don't like that much anyway. I have a few. Most obvious one was the bride getting caught blowing somebody other than her husband in the parking lot between the wedding ceremony and reception. And for part B, they aren't together. They weren't even together when the reception started. Try not to suck any dick on the way to the parking lot. So, I mean, at least she made it to the parking lot. I was one of the bridesmaids in this wedding. The groom was a major jerk. Very snobby and looked down on the bride and her family because they didn't have money. Because the bride's family didn't have much money and was paying everything they could for the wedding. It was very small, and we, the bridesmaids, did most of the decorating and setting up. Bride's dad was the pastor of the church, so we were able to get in and work on the reception room a day or two before the wedding. The entire wedding party was supposed to help. The groomsman showed up, but no groom. He wasn't answering his phone. His parents couldn't find him. Groomsmen had no idea where he was. Just dropped off the face of the earth for 2 days. The wedding party looked like we were in 2 separate weddings. She wanted a turquoise blue as a wedding color, and he wanted gold. She wanted casual and comfortable. He wanted formal. So instead of either making any compromise, they each did their own thing with their side of the wedding party. The bridesmaids wore bright turquoise skirts and flip-flops. The groomsmen wore full suits with gold ties. In the photos, we looked like 2 separate weddings who stumbled on each other. Bride's family was super conservative and didn't drink alcohol. Their church did not allow it on church property. Groom was basically still a frat boy. He legit worked for his fraternity for a year after graduation and couldn't stand the no alcohol rule. He got wasted in the parking lot before the ceremony and during the reception. Like we didn't know all of the groomsmen had full flasks of whiskey. I mean, I totally spiked my drink from one of the groomsmen's flasks, but I didn't get trashed or flaunt it. We had all spent considerable money being part of this wedding. Bridesmaid dresses, travel, hotels, etc. and agreed that if she called it off, we would happily eat the cost of everything and just be happy that she didn't marry him. But no, she said she couldn't call off the wedding since everyone knew they were getting married and had already arrived. I've never seen a bride's parents look so miserable as their daughter got married and her dad performed the ceremony. They lasted officially almost 4 years, but she left him maybe a year before that and moved into her own place. She was supporting him through a law school and he treated her like shit. Wouldn't let her meet his friends. Occasionally hit her if she questioned him about something. We found his dating profiles online, which were absolutely wild. Her super conservative Christian parents offered to get her a divorce lawyer, and his family took her side in the divorce. The bride was constantly on her phone and very often had to go to the bathroom with it, like a lot. She did this a lot the year of the wedding, and on the day of when something didn't seem right. So someone followed her. She went into one of those family bathrooms that only had one toilet in it, and she forgot to lock the door. One of the bridesmaids opens the door and the bride is spread eagle finger blasting herself on FaceTime with an ex-BF. Wedding obviously was stopped at this point. Groom was furious. Turns out she had been cheating on the groom pretty much the entire time they had ever been together. Asterisk asterisk holy shit, I wasn't expecting this to blow up so much. To answer some questions. No, they didn't get married. I have no idea if her and the bridesmaid are still friends. As far as I know, the bride moved on to the next victim. I ran into the groom maybe 4 months after this all happened. He said when he left the reception, he went and packed a suitcase and flew to Jamaica for like 2 weeks, quit his job, changed his phone number, and when he came back, she was gone. Doesn't know where she is and doesn't care. He sold his house and bought a piece of property and built a small house on it, like 700 square feet. I don't remember what he does for a living now, but he made it clear he will never trust another woman again. Haven't seen him since then. Thanks for watching the video. Subscribe to the channel for more videos. Smash that like button to show your support. Comment with your own wacky wedding stories.